think now it's recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Okay. Yeah.
we're doing it documentary style mostly because we can't relate. Initially, we had, we're going to list off the victims' names. We have like a pretty long list where we're going to like do it in memorial for them.
Yeah.
And we talked to we're doing it for a project for school, obviously. So we talked to our teacher that's coordinating that, and she said, don't try and make it sound like you're talking for them or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because it would be inappropriate, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, documentary style. We've contacted quite a few associations and things like that. We're still waiting for words back and trying to get some footage. And we're going to acknowledge the history about everything, residential schools, lifestyle, and a lot of our questions are kind of related to lifestyle and how that's affected it.
Yeah.
And then we've also been trying to get Stephen Harper's speech and Justin Trudeau's speech, but as far as rights to stuff, it's way out of our price range or anything like that. So we're going to touch on it, but we can't actually put in the video or anything, like the actual clip of them. But, yeah.
Well, I think because if you guys are not selling it, you're only going to show it at festivals. There are certain regulations, and especially if you're using, let's say, Trudeau's speech or Harper's speech to emphasize a point that you have, there's a lot of gray area that you have as far as using that material if you can find it online. I'm not telling you to do it, but you can. Without, if you're not selling it and you are in festivals, it's the same thing for, let's say, music rights. If you use known music or music by certain artists, most of the time for festivals, there won't be any issue in you using it. But if you were ever to sell it or to try to put it on any kind of network or Netflix or Hulu that are dominating now, then you would definitely have an issue. But in that case, you should be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I know I'm being recorded, so I'll be very careful how I say it.
We won't include that.
But there is kind of this leeway, especially online and with the festivals, especially for documentaries, as long as it really emphasizes a point that you are making and not just being used for the sake of, let's say, using a recognizable face to do it, then you should be okay.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So as far as from me, is there any particular questions or things that you need or areas to focus on?
Yeah, we have a list of questions that we'd like to go through. All right.
So should we go through anything else?
Just go to town on the answers, as much info as possible.
And it would be best if you could look directly in the camera because our teacher really wants that.
Get in the camera.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah.
So like this.
Okay. So our first question is, what was the reason you created Highways of Tears?
The reason I made Highway of Tears was essentially I went to northern British Columbia to go visit my sister, and I found out about one particular case, and it was about this girl, Nicole Hoare. And she was a tree planter, and she was white, and she decided to go hitchhiking outside of Prince George, and they actually ended up doing one of the largest search and rescues in Canadian history, to find her. And when I found out about her story, because I was hanging out with a lot of tree planters, a lot of people seemed to know about her story and to really care about it. And I decided I really wanted to work on a fiction feature film based on a tree planter that goes missing. And what I realized very quickly in typing up her name, this term Highway of Tears kept on coming up, which, Nicole Hoare is sort of part of that term of Highway of Tears, which she's really helped shed a light on. And the more that term came up, I started to do more and more research online. And then when I started seeing certain names, I was put in touch with certain family members. And then it really became kind of an obsession as far as learning more about this story. And then I realized that I really could not do a fiction piece on it, that I really needed to do a documentary, because it was, and it still is, it's a deep-rooted pain that is still very real, because we're still not sure exactly how to solve this issue. Thankfully, in the last 2 to 3 years, the government and various organizations from one side of the country to the other are talking about it. So that was the initial nucleus, was just taking a trip to go visit my sister and being on this campground that was very, very close to actually where Nicole Hoare went missing, and it really spawned everything else.
Okay. All right. Our next question is, what are some lifestyle realities that Aboriginal women face?
I think as far as lifestyle realities that Aboriginal women face, first and foremost, there's, in some of these reservations, there's extreme poverty. In a lot of these reservations, there's 98% unemployment. So just as that basis, if we're taking it in these more rural communities, in the ones where they're really outside of their, within their reservations that can be 2 to 4 to 6 hours away from a real city. And I'll backtrack it afterwards to take you into the cities, is basically within those reservations, if they need to go to a doctor's office, if they need to get any sort of medical or scholastic help, and even to travel, a lot of them don't have driver's licenses. So those certain things really come into effect. And then you also have, the issue of domestic violence, where there's obviously a lot of drug use on a lot of these reservations and in the neighboring communities. Also in the north, in Ontario as well, there's a lot of things where there's, especially they have what's called man camps, where these big companies come and set up and create infrastructures, whether it be for pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. Young men come in with a lot of money, and they usually expect something, because usually they'll get alcohol and drugs, and they'll expect the girls as well. And as you trace it back through history, a lot of, if we deal with Native Americans and also Aboriginals in Canada, it is the generational issue of how people view Aboriginal women, and they're kind of sex objects. And I think that still to this day hasn't changed. I know as a white Caucasian male growing up, as you see, like, let's say Pocahontas, growing up, I didn't necessarily see anything wrong with it, because we're kind of taught it's a Disney style thing, it's a cartoon. But when you really start to look at it, and then forging relationships with a lot of Aboriginal people throughout Canada, you start to realize that the way that she is portrayed really shows psychologically how they are treated, and that kind of starts to tie into in the inner cities, where the women basically leave their reservations looking for a better life, maybe work, or to really be part of the community, and they end up, oftentimes in really impoverished locations of cities. We talk a lot in Canada about the downtown east side, and even, in Vancouver, there's a lot of shelters, and around those shelters, the women are being heavily abused.
Okay, and for our third question, when you made the film, relations between Aboriginal women and RCMP officers were shaky. Where does this stem from?
The relationship between the RCMP and the Aboriginal peoples has spanned for a very, very long time. One of the first mandates of the RCMP was basically to take the children from the reservations and put them into residential schools, which I think it was in 2008 that Stephen Harper, Prime Minister Harper, issued an apology to the Aboriginal people for.
Just a moment there. We're approaching our limit on recording, so I think we have to stop.